The draft is just 2 weeks away, but there's still plenty of time for Miami to decide who is the best fit for this roster. And we'll be looking at some of the lesser known names on the board that might be an option for the Heat in the second round. Grab your blue notebooks and get set for today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil, both of us credentialed Heat media members. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Best way to support the show is by subscribing on YouTube, liking the videos on YouTube. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We're continuing our Blue Notebook NBA Draft Prep series. On one episode every week between now and the draft, we'll be diving into the scouting reports on a bunch of prospects that we're going to organize by major questions and themes. So this week, we're looking at which players are the best fits for the Heat in the second round with the 43rd pick.
That's what I'm doing. I'm taking 10 blue notebooks with me to Malibu with my wife. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu.
My life.
So, David, let's start with a couple of guys that we already know have visited the Heat for a workout. Arizona forward Keshad Johnson and UConn guard and national champion Tristen Newton. Who do you want to start with?
Well, before I even do that, I just want to say one of the perhaps the greatest compliment that's ever been paid to you for putting that together was that somebody complained no more Blue Notebook episodes because that song gets stuck in their head all day. That is a fantastic response to that. Like, it's just like, I mean, how much more can you ask for? It's like,
it's quite the jingle.
So catchy. Yeah, you create something so catchy that I can't get out of my head, but I hate it and I never want to hear about it. Draft be damned. I don't want to hear that song ever again. But, other than that, let's start off with Keshad Johnson because I think he's an interesting prospect anyway. From Arizona, a little bit on the older side. He transferred to Arizona there. He's 23 years old. 6'7" with a 6'10" wingspan, 224 pounds. So really solid, stout player. And you know, he's got NBA size, NBA ready body, strong, good size, improved shooter. But I like that his rhythm looked pretty comfortable. If I'm looking at what I saw from him, he's a guy who can be a screen and roller. He's got a good athleticism, can dive to the basket, but at the same time, he's also willing to spot up from the perimeter. So I guess he would be more along that kind of power forward spot. I think he played some center throughout his collegiate career, but that's basically because of college. At 6'7", he wouldn't really fit the bill for Miami, although we've seen them run that kind of option before. It's just not ideal. I think he's more in a power forward. I like his motor. He's just got a lot of zip to it, you know. He just does not stop, at least from what I saw of him. He just seemed like he was always active, chasing ball down, you know, just always looking to get a rebound or making a play on defense. He didn't get roasted too much, but, you know, he's just making up for his lack of size, I think, with some intensity. Maybe that's what he's showcasing as an older upperclassman is that, you know what, I might not have the physical tools that make me stand out in the draft, but I can show them I've got lots of stuff that would really be a nice fit for Heat culture. And I was, you know, like the comparison from the Ringer, Jay Crowder. I mean, they've been looking for somebody to replace what Jay Crowder could be for, 4 years now. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far in that comparison, but I mean, given what Crowder was able to do for Miami, if Johnson could come anywhere close, I think it would be a really nice fit for the Heat.
I've got a different comp that I want to make here in a second, but you mentioned the shooting there. He shot almost 39% on 93 three-point attempts last year. Hard to know if that was an anomaly or not, right? He's 30% from three-point range over a 5-year collegiate career, 71% from the line. So besides that 39% mark, there's not a whole lot there indicating that this guy's a legitimate NBA shooter. But at the same time, he stayed there for 5 years, and his shot did get better each season. And I think that's something that the Heat will look at and say, you know what, this guy's improving every year. That's a good sign. We like that this guy's coachable, willing to put the work in, etc. He is really competitive on defense. He's a hustle guy. But he's not just like diving for loose balls, drawing charges, which he does, but he had 36 steals and 26 blocks in 36 games. That's pretty productive for a defensive player and for a Heat team that's looking for disruptive guys who could jump passing lanes, get block shots, create turnovers, create those swing plays. Keshad Johnson at least did that for Arizona last year. I think I'm with you. Probably more of a power forward, small forward sometimes. The Jay Crowder comp is interesting. When I watched him from a body type perspective and an athletic standpoint, he reminded me of, remember Jonathan Simmons? Played for the Spurs for like a year. And he had like a week of almost like Linsanity for a while and then just sort of fell off. But
because he paid his own way for his G League tryout, etc.
Yeah, I mean, this guy hopefully will get drafted at least. But, Jonathan Simmons, the knock on him, I remember he was part of the Warriors in their G League program for a little bit. The knock on him was maybe like a little low of basketball IQ. You listen to Keshad Johnson in these post-game interviews and read stories about him. This guy's not like a low IQ player. This guy was a leader on Arizona, a leader on his team, and maybe that's just virtue of him being an upperclassman. But we've seen the Heat like those guys before, namely with Jaime Jaquez. So I think you listen to this guy talk, you watch him play, he feels like he could be in that Heat locker room. The guy who reminds me of is Jonathan Simmons, because in that physicality sense, he gets the ball off that rebound and he barely like run. He's not necessarily running down the court. He's not flying down the court. He's rumbling down the court. He's all shoulders and knees, just going towards the basket. Really high waisted from a body type perspective. So he's got these super long strides that I find pretty interesting.
It looks a little awkward, right?
Yeah, a little awkward. Not an above the rim player necessarily, although he can get there. I think in terms of what the Heat are looking for with their developmental program guys, you think about guys like Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, Derek Jones Jr., even R.J. Hampton, Alondas Williams, Jamal Cain, guys that they've kind of gone through, larger framed, NBA framed players, kind of balls of clay that they can mold into whatever it is that they need them to be. And it feels like Keshad Johnson could be that kind of clay.
He can dribble, like he can create something, like he can pass okay, mostly entry level passes and things of that sort. But still, like it's a good starting point. And like you said, he's a moldable player, and if he's high IQ enough, it's worth the second round flyer. I don't know if he's the high upside guy, but you know that what you're getting from him, and the hope is that he can turn into something where he can kind of fine tune exactly what skill he can bring to the NBA level. It might just be high energy motor guy, but you have to develop something over the course of his career. Yes, and size.
Let's talk a little bit about Tristen Newton, 23 years old, 5-year college player like Johnson is, and he was a lot more successful. Helped lead UConn as their starting point guard to back-to-back national championships. Was their primary playmaker. The thing that obviously stands out to me watching the film, watching UConn on these 2 championship runs, throws great lobs. Maybe that's just because he was throwing them to Donovan Clingan all the time, but they were accurate. They were on time. I like that he's like, you know what? This guy's 7 feet tall. This guy's enormous. It's really easy offense for me to just throw lobs to this guy. I like that recognition. I like that he wasn't trying to do too much. That's why he's a second-round prospect, not a first-round prospect, but the lobs were good. Made open jumpers. I like his size at 6'5". There's bound to be Andrew Nembhard comparisons. That's happening already. I think he's a better passer than Nembhard was at this stage when Nembhard was coming out of Gonzaga. Maybe not as strong as a scorer as Nembhard was, but at 6'5" with a decent wingspan, good passer, and winning experience and a winning mentality, you could do worse than if you're looking for some backup point guard help in the second round, I think.
Yeah, no, I like that comparison. Nembhard has been like a really good player for
yeah, I mean, that guy's turning into a star, and that's why I think people are going to try to make the comparisons. And I would
but still though, like
an
upperclassman with experience, a leadership skill, good defender, got that dog in him, right? Like that's a positive trait. If you take a chance on a big in the first round and you want to kind of supplement your backcourt in the second round, I could see that being a really good fit for Miami. So they are bringing him in for a workout. So
yes,
they're clearly interested in what he brings to the table.
Again, one of those guys it's a nice fit. The Heat are like, oh yeah, 2-time national champion. We got to talk to this guy.
Yeah, he's got
and then maybe
he's Mario Chalmers
a little bit, right? And Nembhard again had success at Gonzaga. The Heat are going to love that Newton was coached up by Mark Few, right? They love these premier coaches and what they're able to teach these guys at the collegiate level, so they have to do less of that at the NBA level, right?
Right.
DeLon Wright, Patty Mills, those guys are going to be free agents. The Heat never really filled the Gabe Vincent gap over the last year. Tristen Newton just feels like a guy who maybe walk in, can be coached up, has some of the size, the frame, the experience where they probably feel like they could rely on him a little bit, at least in terms of being a developmental guy and something that they could build off of. But
How's his handle?
Handle's solid. I mean, the guy was a lead playmaker, didn't turn the ball over much, had a great assist-to-turnover ratio, just solid. Just like a solid guy. Not spectacular in any one thing, but pretty reliable in everything. That's second-round picks. Heat culture, baby. Yeah. Fits kind of the guys I've been looking at.
Absolutely.
Could the Heat find their next Haywood Highsmith in the second round? I have an idea of who that might be. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, I've talked about Game Time before. It's really the most convenient way to get killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee, etc. They take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, but not just NBA tickets. It's comedy shows, concert tickets, whatever you're looking for. I just used it this past week. I bought tickets for a concert event in August I'm really looking forward to, and I used Game Time, saved, I don't know, 40, 50 bucks when I checked the prices over at Ticketmaster. That was great, really convenient. Found exactly what I was looking for. Use the views from your seat. It was so convenient. Saving money with Game Time. It's just so easy to do. So you know what? I am really, really excited to talk about Game Time. It's a product. It's an app that we use. And again, it's just really convenient. If you're looking for tickets for anything, you want to get tickets for the Panthers, during their run to the Stanley Cup, you can use that when you preseason tickets already going sale. At least their schedule has already been announced for the Miami Heat. If you're looking to get some tickets, Game Time is the way to go. And again, there's so many different options so that you can get the best ticket prices available. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. So download the app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. Get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week, even in the offseason. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. You can also follow us on your podcast app. Moving on with our Blue Notebook scouting reports, we're going to touch on a few more second-round prospects. The one I want to start with here, Harrison Ingram, 6'5" forward, 7-foot wingspan out of UNC, 233 pounds, played a few years there, shot 38.5% on threes last season, 34.5% for his career, competitive rebounder. Averaged almost 9 rebounds a game last year. A lot of those on the offensive glass. Does a great job coming in, crashing those offensive boards, getting those putbacks. Also averaged 1.4 steals per game. Very productive for a UNC team. Stanford, he transferred there from Stanford after a couple years at Stanford, went to UNC. Both programs used him on the ball quite a bit, which I found very interesting. Averaged almost 3 assists per game last year for the Tar Heels. So he's got some game there, but I think that's sort of an added bonus. To me, in the NBA, he projects as more of a 3-and-D forward. You see comparisons to like a guy like Grant Williams, PJ Tucker. He's sort of in that mold. Versatile on defense, takes charges, just all the Heat stuff. I really, really like Harrison Ingram's game.
And I guess following up on your tease, you see him as having the potential to be the next Haywood Highsmith?
I'm looking at guys in the second round who can do something at an elite level. And Harrison Ingram, to me, is one of the better perimeter defenders, length defenders, I should say, in this class. Okay. He's versatile, long arms. I could see him switching 4 different positions at his best.
Yeah.
I think maybe like a Haywood Highsmith, like what Vince Williams Jr. was last year for Memphis. These guys who just, they don't really, you're not asking them to do too much. You're not asking them to be your star forward, your star wing, but you're asking them to come in and just fill the gaps, right? Defensively and just hit enough open shots where you could stay on the floor.
6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan. I mean, that's basically Highsmith type and stout too. Like, he's going to put on some more muscle at the NBA level, but I think he's already a guy who has that same kind of physical mold. Yeah, absolutely. So, my concern is that I don't know that he does anything at an elite level necessarily. He does everything pretty well. Maybe you could say as far as a perimeter defender is concerned, but that's at the collegiate level. I'm not sure that will translate right away at the NBA level, but there's enough kind of widespread ability there where he's not going to be a liability necessarily, and I think you can build off that into a functional rotation player. So to me, I do like that comp with Highsmith. I could see it. My concern is the shooting, but then again, Haywood wasn't much of a shooter either, that he was never really known for that at the collegiate level. And then, continued work in Miami, get some summertime work with Duncan Robinson. Next thing you know, you could shoot almost 40%. Right. You can cash in $10 million a year. So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing with the Heat. I've gone over this before, but their checklist is positional size, character, ball skills. And Harrison Ingram has all of those things. They care about shooting, but not as much as I think other teams put a premium on it, because you already made the point with Highsmith. They trust internally that they could turn guys into shooting. The Heat view shooting, three-point shooting specifically, as a teachable skill. You can't teach wingspan. You can't really teach ball skills. You can get a little bit better at that, but there needs to be, I feel like, an inherent sort of base level that you have to build off of. And you can't teach the other Heat stuff, the competitiveness, the high character, the basketball over everything, the work ethic, all that stuff. And based on all the interviews with Ingram, he's got all that stuff. I'm with you. The shot is a little shaky. Like I said, 34.5% for his career. He had a high 38.5% from threes last year. I do wonder if he'd be better with more catch and shoot stuff, because again, he was asked to be on the ball quite a bit at Stanford and at UNC. Take him off the ball, because he's not doing that at the NBA level. He could drive closeouts, do that kind of stuff. But in terms of being on the ball early in the shot clock, I don't really see that for him at the NBA level. But I like that he could do a little bit of that. This is just a guy to me that he's a development project. Like, he's not going to walk in right away and be an awesome starting, rotation forward for you. But
you never know with Miami.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Starts in year one.
But you would draft him at least with the intention of, let's get him in here for a year, and then maybe by his second year, he can come off the bench and be a nice little Swiss Army knife for us. Who's the next guy you want to talk about?
I don't even know if I necessarily want to talk about him, but he's around that same kind of projected area in a lot of mock drafts. Mm-hmm. It's Adem Bona from UCLA.
Yeah.
He's a guy. Yeah. See, I do not. 21, so he's young, still developing, and I think so some potential there. 6'8" with a 7'4" wingspan, 243 pounds. So seriously, like a good physical type. A guy that could play multiple positions, although I'm not sure where he's going to fit in. He's not skilled enough for a 4.
Yeah,
I think he's big enough for a 5.
He's a smaller 5 to me, pretty strongly. I don't see.
He's
him
like watching him, and I was remembering our series last year. He's like a worse Christian Coloco, which was like where we kind of had the biggest divide in terms of like appreciating the guys that we reviewed last year. Like, you were high at Coloco, I was not. Coloco, obviously had some medical issues that took him out of the game, unfortunately, as a rookie. So it's not that we ever got a chance to see him develop. But as far as what I watched Bona, I don't see anything. Like, he can screen and roll. He's still young, got some nice footwork in the interior. But like, all of it seems like everybody keeps saying explosive athlete. I'm seeing him like take these long, winding kind of strides, huge kind of like his movements just seem slower to me. He seems like the antithesis of explosive. Like, can he finish strong? Sure. It just doesn't seem dynamic to me. And that's what I think a lot of people mean when they say explosive. I just don't see it. He doesn't pop. He doesn't have that second step. He doesn't have that burst as far as rebounding is concerned. He's just bigger than everybody at the collegiate level, which is absolutely fine, but that doesn't necessarily translate at the NBA. So, I mean, you could see something, and maybe if he's competitive enough, he shows out. If he curses Pat Riley at his workouts, you could see him maybe earning a spot on the roster. But at the same time, from what I saw of him, and granted, it wasn't a lot. I didn't watch a lot of film. None of it really stood out to me. So I'm curious as to see what it was about him that you think popped.
In terms of the athleticism, he really tested well at the combine in Chicago. Had the highest, tied for the highest standing vertical leap at 35 inches, tied with Devin Carter, who's considered one of the best athletes in the draft at 35 inches. Was top 10 in max vertical leap at 40 inches. Basically right there with guys like Bronny James, who again showed out in that area. So top 10 in these leaping things. So at the combine, he was explosive, but I was with you, like on film, it wasn't like he was using that all the time. So I do wonder if there's some sort of disconnect there, but at least there's something there to tap into at some point, perhaps, maybe. To me, he's very strongly a center. He's a small center, right?
Right.
But I like that he averaged 1.8 blocks per game last year, despite the fact that he's only 6'8". The 7'4" wingspan obviously helps. The standing reach helps. But that kind of says, okay, almost 2 blocks per game. There is some sort of explosiveness there where he's getting up and he's blocking these shots. 1.1 steals per game, too. So he's using those long arms to poke balls away and stuff like that. I like that level of production in terms of stocks. I also watched the film. Smart defensively. He's not getting beat. I mean, if he's getting beat, it's because a guy's blowing by him and he's just faster, more athletic than him. Right. But he's in the right position. He's in his stance. I like all of this stuff. He competes on the boards too. So I like all of that stuff. I think I'm higher on Bona than you are. I like that he was coached by Mick Cronin. We know the Heat like that he's coached by Mick Cronin because that was a big part of the reason why they liked Jaime Jaquez. So they were coached by the same guy at the same program at UCLA. I don't think there's a ton of upside here. I'm going to be clear. But I think that there's long-term backup center potential here, which in the second round, that's all you're really looking for. He reminds me of Kevon Looney, who's just, he's not going to come in and score 10 points per game. 4, 5, 6 points per game, maybe for his career. But
how big is Looney, though?
About the same size.
Really?
Yeah, Looney's smaller. And so, but, real competitive, smart, coachable, team guy, but despite the size, much more productive rebounder than you would think. But you're not asking him to do a whole lot offensively, score a bunch of points or anything like that. So I like him in terms of a long-term sort of backup center project is where I've got him. You have a couple more guys you want to talk about.
Yeah. Let's see. Adem Bona, we talked about. Keshad Johnson. Pelle Larsson is a guy. Maybe I'll save him for the next segment because he's probably not a reach even at the second round. Like, he is an older player. He's 23, 6'5" with a 6'8" wingspan. So he's going to get the short arm kind of thing. He got some Grayson Allen comps. Somebody compared him to Desmond Bain. I don't see that. But I just saw him, and look, he's a 43% shooter, solid defender, good passer, smart passer, saw cutters, saw movement well on offense. Held his own defensively, but again, a little prone to getting blown by even as a forward spot. So, I saw him, and you know what? Honestly, I almost right away I saw, that kind of looked like a Max Strus. And I don't know if mock drafts have him all over the place. He was a beneficiary of having a pretty deep Arizona squad, so he was able to continue to grow his game there and then show out as a senior. But, if you can get him as an undrafted signee, I think he would flourish in Miami. I think he's a guy who, again, Miami would really love to get and would think that he's a steal if you could get him as an undrafted signee. I just don't know that you'd be willing to take a chance on him at 43. So that's just kind of where I saw him. But again, good shooter, not explosive, a little older, still a work in progress, like even as a 23-year-old player. But I think that he's shown enough where there's a translatable skill, especially as a 43% shooter. Guy who can catch and shoot off the dribble. He can do a lot.
I think you nailed it with the Max Strus comp, right? Awesome shooter. Probably he's a more productive shooter coming out of college than Max Strus was. People don't realize Max Strus wasn't like a prolific shooter coming out of college. Pelle Larsson shot almost 43% last year, although it was only on 3 attempts per game. But again, I think at the NBA level, he'll be more of a catch and shoot guy and less of an on-the-ball guy like he was at Arizona, where he also averaged 3.7 assists per game. But he's got that on-ball potential too. So I like Pelle Larsson. I think he's probably going to get drafted because shooters tend to get drafted. But even if ESPN has him ranked 45 on their board, and the Heat are picking 43, so even at the 43rd pick, it wouldn't necessarily be a reach either. We got a couple more elevator pitches to get to, plus which of these players do we like best for the Heat in the second round? It's coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Listen, there's always action on PrizePicks, and this is the perfect time to try out something new as basketball is winding down. Make sure to try out esports this month because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you'll get your entry fee back. So choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and so much more. And again, PrizePicks is super easy to use, very convenient. You can turn your $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. So make sure to try out PrizePicks today. Download the app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. And don't forget, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. That's PrizePicks. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know who you think the Heat should be selecting in the second round. Any of the players we talked about already? Any of the players we're about to talk about? Maybe you have your own ideas. Let us know in the comments section. Also, follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, let me get to one here. Similar to who you picked in Pelle Larsson, Cam Spencer, another UConn guy, off guard, 6'3" with a 6'5" wingspan. Probably might be the best catch and shoot guy in the draft. 44% on almost 6 3-point attempts per game. Prolific knockdown 3-point shooter. I think if the Heat are looking to add more 3-point shooting behind Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, depending on what they think of a guy like Cole Swider, if they're just trying to add another shooter to their development pipeline, Cam Spencer makes a lot of sense to me. Give me your elevator pitch on your next prospect.
Jonathan Magba. He's got great size at 6 foot. What do we have here? 6 foot 6. Sorry, 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan.
Yeah,
he's got
huge.
great strength, great length. Yeah, doesn't give up on plays. Very good rebounder, great defender. Problem with him, he can make some nice entry passes and stuff like that. I don't know about the feel necessarily, but he cannot shoot worth a lick. And so I don't know. At 6'6", I'm not sure if you can necessarily pencil him in as a 4 either. And I know that we just talked about that in terms of Ingram and Highsmith and whether or not you can develop that skill. It's just tough. I like his overall size. And again, at 7'2" wingspan, you're going to get some block shots and some great defense. So maybe he's another one like that who can kind of be a Highsmith type player eventually.
Yep. Seems like a developmental pick for me. If he charts or if he tests out well and if Miami does work him out and they love the interview and stuff like that, maybe that's somebody that they draft, or maybe he goes undrafted. I'm not really sure. And they put in the developmental pipeline. Did play a little bit of center last year for San Francisco. So there's some versatility there. I have one other guy, Jamal Sheed, guard out of Houston, just a full court defensive presence in the Davion Mitchell type, hard-nosed defender, goes after it. My only concern with him, he's like 6'2", 6'3", with the same wingspan, so he's not particularly big or long. So I do wonder whether or not he's going to be able to be an impactful defender at the NBA level, but I love the effort. And if they're looking for a defensive first guard, I don't know that I would draft him at 43. It seems a little high for me, but maybe if this is a guy who falls out of the draft because of questions with his size and his offensive impact, maybe that's somebody you could scoop up. So unless you have anybody else, we can get to our big question here.
No, with Sheed, I didn't even bother reviewing because I saw him listed at 6 feet. And so he's kind of undersized. And I think Miami's gone that route. I don't think they'd want to go back there again. I think they'd look for something a little bit bigger. So
the big question here is which of these players are the best fit for the Heat at 43? But before we answer that, I did go and look back. Like, is this even worth doing? Because we're talking about the second round. You know what I mean? But the teams have found players in the 40s the last few years, right? And the Heat have also had success in the 40s with their own pick. I think about a guy like Josh Richardson. He was a 50-something pick in 2016. But even in more recent years, players found in the 40s of the draft: Talen Horton-Tucker, Terrence Mann, Trey Jones, Nick Richards, Delano Banton, Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson. No stars, but important rotation pieces to good teams. So the 43rd pick isn't nothing. Now, again, it's easy to just sort of sit here and pick the success stories. There's obviously a lot more guys who are no longer in the league or didn't exactly pan out. But the point is, understanding that the draft is a crapshoot, in the 40s, it's still right there. It's still a crapshoot, but you can find guys, is the point. And if you do your work and you have good coaching, you can find guys.
When was Miami's last second-round pick?
The only one that they owned and kept was Josh Richardson. They traded in for KZ Okpala. They traded out of Bol, and then I think that was the last one that they had. That they entered the draft.
So Paula's the last one that they. Yeah, but still, that was the last pick that they had in the second round. They traded out a Bull.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's just been like, it feels like an exercise we haven't gone through in a while. So I don't know what they're looking for in terms of second round, but given where Miami is likely to be looking to add depth, I think they'd want somebody who's a lot more solid and can fill a role, etc. Yeah, they'll find plenty of guys that are undrafted, and I'm sure they're doing their
I think
due
they're going to be
diligence
looking just to add to their development pipeline. Guys who just fit the Sioux Falls structure. The guys that just, hey, we could put them in, we could throw them into South Dakota, South Dakota, and that person can just eat up basketball for a year, and then maybe be a player for us a year from now. So I think a lot of it is going to be, part of the interview is, hey, if we draft you at 43, are you going to be cool not going to Miami and going to South Dakota and working on your game? Right. Are you going to be willing to do that for us? And if you are, we promise we'll give you a real good chance to carve out a real NBA career. But
in Orlando, tell us there was like a brewery and like an Applebee's or something like that.
You know what? I should have known. I've been there. I've been to South Dakota. I have a Sioux Falls brewery shirt that I love. It's actually pretty good. There's a brewery. It's not a Chili's or a Fridays, but it's sort of like that across from the arena that the Skyforce play in. There's some sort of budget hotel right there that I think the visiting teams play in.
Whichever one of these guys just strikes you as being like, I just love basketball. I'm gonna make it somehow. I love basketball. I can consume basketball night and day. That's the guy that they'll take because they want somebody who might not have the talent, but just is so committed to the work and, like you said, to being in Sioux Falls and being like, there's nothing else to do. This is my only purpose for being here. I don't care about the weather. I just want to go hoop and get better.
So one last thing I'm kind of going back to me, Adem Bona and Harrison Ingram. The one thing I like about Bona, ESPN said he has the best motor in the class. And it shows out on film. Guys always moving, always hustling, setting screens, resetting those screens, crashing the boards for rebounds, playing defense in his stance, waving his arms. I like all of it. The one I keep penciling in terms of the guy who, when I'm doing these mock drafts, Harrison Ingram. And obviously we're not privy to whatever conversations that you're going to have. Hey, are you cool going to South Dakota? Are you cool being this developmental guy? Who knows? But as long as Harrison Ingram's checking those boxes, he makes the most sense for me. He's the guy that I would want the Heat to draft at number 43. And I feel pretty strongly about that, given the physical tools, what he did at college. He's not old. He had 3 years in college, but he's not one of these 5-year guys. He's not super young either. He's got some experience that he could build off of. I think he was well coached. And if you're talking about maybe perhaps losing Haywood Highsmith and Caleb Martin this offseason, it's really hard to backfill that position. I think they'll be able to find guys who they could coach into good shooters, find guys with some size that they could turn into the next Omer Yurtseven or Orlando Robinson. Really hard to find these two-way wings. The fact that they have not yet promoted Jamal Cain from the two-way contract to the standard roster spot doesn't speak a ton of confidence into maybe Jamal Cain being that next guy. Perhaps he can be, but they've not shown that confidence in him yet. So I think they need to start filling that part of the pipeline in terms of forwards with some size. Keshad Johnson obviously could be another option. I just like Harrison Ingram a little bit more.
Yeah, I like Johnson and Ingram. I said what I did about Bona. If he can pop, if it does translate, that's fine. But I just don't see it right myself. So I think I'd lean Ingram or Johnson myself. But I might even lean Johnson. Like, the way you describe Ingram and those intangibles and everything else like that, it's appealing because he does fit a need. But I think Johnson is a little bit more athletic, and that's something that Miami absolutely does need, is to get a little bit more athleticism in their pipeline. So of the two, I'd probably still lean Ingram just because he seems like a more likely surefire quote unquote hit. Because again, we're talking about a second round guy, but I could be talked into Johnson if I saw enough on him.
Wouldn't be mad if they drafted Tristen Newton either, for whatever it's worth. I like him a lot.
Yep.
But in terms of need and stuff like that. All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app.